We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 90a. The Gemara is continuing a brisa. Again, the first case of the brisa was when the cows are meraxos betvua. That means they tread upon the produce. And Rashi over here addresses that first part of the brisa. Hameraxos mishum de gemar melachton lemaiser mishas disha. Already from the time of threshing was the gemar melacha. That's when the work was completed in terms of the obligation of meiser. So that obligation of meiser already set in. That's the point of the brisa. And the brisa continues along the same lines. V'hadoshos betruma umaiser. Let's say they thresh, and we're talking about where they're threshing truma and meiser. Now that usually doesn't occur because usually the truma and meiser separated after the threshing. But in this case, the truma and meiser was separated early. Rashi says v'hadoshos dishas shibolin betruma v'meiser kagon sheikdimu b'shibolin. The case over here is that they took the truma and meiser off early while it was still in its stalks, and so therefore you have a situation where it's doshos betruma, it's threshing truma and meiser. So in both of these cases, the brisa says, Eino over mishum bal tachsom. There's no transgression of bal tachsom, meaning if you muzzle the animal, that's not a violation of bal tachsom. Avol mimnei maris ayin, but because of maris ayin, meaning it looks to people as though the person is violating bal tachsom. So what should he do? Maybe bul me oso hamin. He should bring a piece of whatever that species is, whatever that produce is. V'tola la betraxelin shabepia, and then he should hang it on the basket by its mouth, and that's a way of avoiding that kind of maris ayin. Rashi explains Trumo Meiser, the Stam Dayish La Betrumo Meiser Mishtoikra. In general, when you're threshing, it's not talking about Trumo and Meiser. Dein Trumo Meiser Stam Elamin Hamei Ruach Va'elach. Because Trumo and Meiser are usually separated after already you put the produce in a pile, Kedechsiv Kedogon Min Hagorin, like it says, like Dogon from the granary. Mipnei Maris Ha'ayin, it looks like it's Bal Tachsom Shalo Yomru Olav Shu Chosim. They shouldn't say that the person is muzzling the animal. So Bol means Molayagro. If you bring a fistful, you bring a small amount of that kind of produce, and you put it betraxelin and shabafia, you put it in the basket that's by its mouth. Sako traskel tolan betzavara. Essentially, you hang a sack or a basket by its neck. V'hamachol besocho, and you'll put the food in there. Vocheles, then it will eat that. So that way, it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to appear that you're muzzling the animal. What you're really basically doing is feeding the animal and having it avoid eating the truma and the meiser. That's what the first part of the brisa says. And the brisa continues, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, maybe karshinim, you bring vetches, v'tol Allah, that's what you hang over there. It's not necessarily from the same kind of produce. Shah karshinim yafos la, min hakol. Because the karshinim, the vetches, are good for it, they're good for the animal. And the Gemara continues, Uramini, we have a contradiction from the following brisa, Paros hamarachsos betvua. Again, you have cows that are treading on the produce. Eino over mishum bal tachsom. There's no transgression there of bal tachsom. That's consistent with the first brisa. But the next line, v'hadoshos betrumo meiser, if they're threshing truma and meiser over mishum bal tachsom, he is over. He does transgress on bal tachsom. That seems to contradict the previous brisa. And the brisa continues here, v'nochri hadosh beparoso shel Yisrael. If a non-Jew is threshing with the cow of a Yisrael, eino over mishum bal tachsom. In that case, there's no violation of bal tachsom. However, the other way around, v'Yisrael hadosh beparaso shel nachri, if a Jew is threshing with the cow of a nachri over mishum bal tachsom, then there is a transgression of bal tachsom. And so the Gemara says, kasha truma truma, kasha meiser meiser. We have a contradiction both with regards to truma and with regards to meiser, because again, by both truma and meiser in the first brisa, it said that there's no transgression of bal tachsom, and by both truma and meiser in the second brisa, it said that there is a violation of bal tachsom. And the Gemara says, Bishlama truma truma lo kasha. I understand by truma against truma we can say it's not a contradiction, because kan betruma kan begidule truma. In one case we're talking about truma, and in one case we're talking about the growth of truma. We'll see Rashi in a moment. Ela meiser meiser kasha, but meiser against meiser we do have a question. It's a contradiction. And if you're going to say meiser nami lo kasha, you'll say when it comes to the contradiction in meiser, it's also not difficult, because you'll give the same answer. Kan be meiser, kan begidule meiser. In one case we're talking about meiser, in one case we're talking about the growth of meiser. So that's not true. Bishlama gidule truma truma. I understand the growth of truma is considered truma. Ela gidule meiser chulin, but the growth of meiser is chulin, and it is considered to be chulin. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, gidule tevel v'gidule meiser sheni chulin. It says that if you have growth of tevel and you have growth of meiser sheni, that's considered to be chulin. So we can't give that same answer. And Rashi explains, nachri hadash beparaso shel Yisrael. If the non-Jew is threshing with the cow of a Yisrael, there's no bal tachsom over there. It means to say as follows: Einon ovrim habaylim. The owners, which is the Jew does not transgress bal tachsom, even if the case is as follows: Sha'amru lo chasom. Even if the Jew tells the non-Jew to muzzle the animal. Chasom parasi, muzzle my cow. V'dosh batvua shalchan, you can use it to thresh your produce. Ein aleim averas lo sachsum. There's no aver of lo sachsum in that case. And then the Gemara answered the contradiction with truma by saying in one case we're talking about gidule truma, we're talking about the growth of truma. What that means is as follows: Shazara v'gidla, you planted the truma and it grew. Hagidula and truma midrabanan. The halach is that what grows then from the truma is considered truma only on a drabanan level, and so therefore we can say that's the difference when we're talking about truma on a doraisa level. So there we say eino over mishum bal tachsum. There we say that's real truma, so there's no violation of bal tachsum. If it's only drabanan level, so then there's going to be a violation of bal tachsum. This idea about gidulei truma is one of the 18 things which Beis Shammai ended up being the majority over Beis Hillel. This is Mesechet Shabbos. V'keven delav truma midoraisa. Now, since it's not truma midoraisa, karina beidayish stomach. That's called regular threshing on a doraisa level because it's only truma on a drabanan level, but otherwise on a doraisa level it's not truma. So therefore there would be a violation of bal tachsum in that case. And the Gemara says, B'shlama gidulei truma truma. Now I understand at least gidulei truma is considered truma midrabanan, says Rashi. That's at least truma midrabanan. So you could say again, in one brisa we're talking about truma doraisa, one case truma derabanan, v'yitzrech lashmin and dover. And the point is, we're trying to teach a chiddush that you still transgress bal tachsum even though there's some level of truma. But when it comes to meiser, as the Gemara said, gidulei meiser is considered chulin. And the Gemara brought a Mishnah which says gidulei tevel, that the growth of tevel, which means as follows: tvua shenimrucha bekri, you have produce which was piled up, v'zora betivla, and so it was tevel, and then you planted it as tevel. Harehi kashar chulin v'ochel heman arai. That's considered like regular chulin. You can eat from it in a temporary fashion ad shemareach until you pile that up. The kaven de zora, because once you planted kala batel isur, at that point in time, once you plant it, so the isur goes away. Uv'trumahu degazra. The point over here is there was only a derabanan gezerah by truma. Kidim afarish hasam. That's explained over there. Gezerah mishum truma tahora biyad Yisrael. The reason is there's a gezerah. Maybe you'll have a situation of pure truma in the hands of a Yisrael. Shema Yizra'ena lihi pater shelo yidnena lekohen. He's going to try to plant it in order to get out of truma that he doesn't have to give it to a kohen. Inami mishum truma tameya biyad kohen. Or you could have a scenario where there's truma tameya in the hands of a kohen. Dilma mashi lo lezora v'asi bali de takola. Maybe he'll hold on to it in order to plant it, and then he's going to be holding on to this truma tameya, which could end up becoming a stumbling block. In any case, the Gemara said you can't give the same answers with meiser as we gave by truma. And so the Gemara continues, Ela lo kasha, rather it's not difficult. Hava meiser rishon. This brisa is talking about meiser rishon. Hava meiser sheni. The other brisa is talking about meiser sheni. The difference is meiser rishon essentially is considered to be like regular produce. It's owned by the person as regular chulin, and so therefore there would be a violation of bal tachsum if you muzzle the animal. But when it comes to meiser sheni, that's considered to be mammon gavoa. The pasuk says lo sachsom shor bidisho. You can't muzzle the animal bidisho. That wouldn't apply by meiser sheni. It's not considered bidisho because it belongs to the Almighty. It's considered mammon gavoa. And the Gemara gives another answer along the same lines. By same, if you want, I could say hava meiser sheni. Both brises are meiser sheni, but it's a machlokus whether meiser sheni is really mammon gavoa. Velokash, it's not difficult. Ha Rabbi Meir, ha Rabbi Yehuda. One brise is Rabbi Meir, one's Rabbi Yehuda. Ha Rabbi Meir, damar meiser mammon gavoa. Who this one is Rabbi Meir that says the meiser sheni is mammon gavoa. Ha Rabbi Yehuda damar meiser sheni mammon hedyot. And the other brise is Rabbi Yehuda who says the meiser sheni is mammon hedyot. And so therefore that's the machlokas. Again, if meiser sheni is mammon gavoa, there's not going to be bal tachsum. But if you say that it's mammon hedyot, there will be bal tachsum. And Rashi explains mammon gavoa. Again, meiser sheni is mammon gavoa. Velo karina be bidisho. It's not called bidisho. That's why there's no violation of bal tachsum. That's not something that you really can feed the animal anyway. So it's not a problem of muzzling the animal. And Rashi continues v'gabe truma. Now, in terms of truma, let's say it was truma that the animal was threshing with, where we're saying that there's no violation of muzzling the animal. Misukma shahaisa parshal Yisrael. You could say we're talking about a cow that belongs to a Yisrael. And it's the same idea. Sha'asr la'achila truma. It's forbidden to feed a truma. Therefore, there's no violation in terms of muzzling the cow. V'afilu im dash ba'kohen. Now, the truth is, even if the one doing the threshing is a kohen, it would still be a problem if it's owned, if the animal is owned by Yisrael. The Tanya's will end in a brayso kohen shesachar param Yisrael. If a kohen rents a cow from a Yisrael, afa bisha mezonoseh olav, even though he's supposed to provide the mezonos, the food, lo yachilena karshine truma. He's not supposed to feed it the karshinim, the vetch of truma. And the Gemara continues, Heichi Dami, what exactly is the case? As Rashi explains, Heichi Dami de lahavi meiser kodem disha. How is it that you can have it that it's meiser before the threshing? Usually you only call it meiser after the threshing. And the Gemara answers, as Rashi mentioned earlier, Kagon shegdimu b'shibol. And the case over here is that you called the meiser early, you designated it meiser early while it was still in stalks. Rashi says, Kagon shegdimu v'kara shem olav. He called it the name of meiser. He designated it as meiser early b'shibolin while it was still in stalks. But the Gemara continues to Rabbi Yehuda, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rashi here says, Rabbi Yehuda, Kavan the Shem Meiser Olav, since it's considered to be Meiser, talking here about Meiser Sheni, Rabbi Yehuda Nihi Nami Demamon Hedyadhu, even if we're going to grant according to Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to say the Bryce is talking according to Rabbi Yehuda that Meiser Sheni is Mamon Hedyot, and so therefore the violation of Baal Tachsom would in fact apply, and the animal is supposed to be able to eat from that Meiser Sheni, because the Meiser Sheni is Mamon Hedyot, but we have a different problem still. Haboy Choma, don't we need to eat it within the walls of Yerushalayim? We're still talking about Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni cannot be eaten outside of Yerushalayim. So how do you fulfill that if you're going to be feeding this to the animal? And the Gemara answers, Kagon Shadosh Lifnim Mechomas Beis Pagi. The case is that the animal is threshing within the wall of Beis Pagi. Beis Pagi essentially was a suburb right outside Yerushalayim. The walls enclosed Beis Pagi, and therefore it is essentially within the walls of Yerushalayim. And Rashi explains, Haboy choma she'asr la'achlu chutz l'chomas Yerushalayim. It's asr to eat this outside of the walls of Yerushalayim. V'hechi yasi lav de lo sachsom v'dachi lav de lo sucha lechol b'sharecha. How does the lav of lo sachsom come along and say you can't muzzle the animal? The animal gets to eat, but now we don't have to worry about eating it within Yerushalayim. You can eat it outside Yerushalayim. And the Gemara says, Beis Pagi was within the walls of Beis Pagi, hekef chitzon shel Yerushalayim. This was essentially the most outer part, the outer wall around Yerushalayim. Shosifu olav, they added on. They extended the area around Yerushalayim, Kari Beis Pagi. That's called Beis Pagi. In any case, that could be a situation where the animal is able to eat. And the Gemara continues with another answer. If you want, I could say another answer to the contradiction in terms of the brises, whether there is a violation of Baal Tachsom or not. Lokasha, it's not difficult. Kan b'meiser vadai. In one case, we're talking about meiser vadai, meaning it's certainly meiser. So there we can say, let's say you're talking about meiser sheni vadai, for example, and it's mamon gavoa. There we can say that the isser does not apply because the animal cannot eat. Kan and it's not considered b'disho rather. And kan b'meiser demai. And here we're talking about meiser, which is just demai, meaning we're not really certain that it's meiser. That's only midrabanan, and so therefore the violation of Baal Tachsom will apply. And Rashi explains, Kan b'meiser demai. Here we're talking about demai. Delasel midrabanan. That's only midrabanan. What's meiser demai? Halokeach me'am ha'oretz shechayv ol hafresh meiser sheni ala safek. A person buys from an am ha'oretz. The halach is you have to separate meiser sheni, but that's meiser sheni that you're separating due to a doubt. Ol haloso Yerushalayim, you bring it up to Yerushalayim. So again, a simple distinction. When we're talking about real meiser sheni, that's not demai. So there we'll say there's no violation of Baal Tachsom. But when we're talking about meiser of demai, which is really only meiser midrabanan, of course there will be a violation of Baal Tachsom in that case. And the Gemara says, Hashta da'asas lahachi. Well, now that we have this answer, Truma nami lo kasha. We don't have a kasha when it comes to Truma as well. We can give the same answer. Kan b'trumas vadai, kan b'trumas demai. In one case, we're talking about Truma where it's certain Truma. In the other case, we're talking about Trumas demai, the same basic answer. But the Gemara says, 1 second, there's no such thing as Trumas demai. B'shlama meiser demai ika. I understand meiser demai, that actually exists. Ela Trumas demai miika. Is there such a thing as Trumas demai? Vatanya, but we learned in a braysa, afu bitel es havidoy, the Gazra al Admai, he nullified the vidoy, the confession, and he made a gezerah on Demai. Levisha shalach b'chol gvul Yisrael v'ra, because he sent out in all the boundaries of Israel and saw shelo hayu mafrishan, that they were not separating Ella Truma Gedola Bilvad. The only thing they were separating was Truma Gedola. In any case, you see, the point is the Amei Ha'aretz did separate Truma. There's no such thing as Truma Demai. We are certain that they separated Truma. It's the Meiser that we're not certain about. So you can't say that we're talking about Truma Demai. Trumas Demai, that wouldn't even exist. And so the Gemara says, instead the Gemara says, Ella Lokasha, rather it's not difficult, Kan Betrumas Meiser Vadai. You're right, there's no such thing as Truma Demai, but there is such a thing as Trumas Meiser of Demai. Trumas Meiser, again, is the portion, the 1/10 from the Meiser Rishon that's given to the Kohen. So there already you have Meiser Rishon. If they didn't separate Meiser Rishon, if you can have Meiser Rishon of Demai, so then you certainly can have Trumas Meiser of Demai. So here we're talking about Trumas Meiser Vadai, where it's certainly Trumas Meiser, and in such a situation, of course, there's no Baal Tachsom. Kan Trumas Meiser Demai. Here we're talking about Trumas Meiser of Demai, by Trumas Meiser of Demai, which is only Midirabonan. So there would be Baal Tachsom. And Rashi explains, Afu Yochanan Kohen Gadol, the he that we're talking about over here refers to Yochanan Kohen Gadol. This has been Meseches Sota and Meseches Sota. So what did he do? Bita Lasavidoy, number one, he nullified the confession, Shal Meiser. That's talking about the confession that one makes, that he separated the proper Meiser. Ve'afilo Shal Chaverim. Even when we're talking about Chaverim, which are people who keep the halachas, still he was mevatel, this idea of the confession. She'ein lomar biyarti hakodesh ben habayis v'gam nesativ lalevi. The person shouldn't say that I took care of all the things that were holy in the house and I gave to the Levi. The reason why the person shouldn't say that is Lafi Shalo Hayu knows the Meiser Rishon LeLevi Keil Chaso, because they didn't give any more Meiser Rishon to the Levi according to the proper halacha. The Rachmana Amar LeLevim. The Torah says you should give to the Levi the Meiser Rishon. However, V'konsinhu Ezra. However, Ezra imposed a fine V'tziva L'sita LaKohanim, and he said that it has to be given to the Kohanim. That's discussed in the Gemara. V'gazer al Hadamai, and also he made a gezer when it came to Demai. Meaning, this is talking again about Yochanan and Kohen Gadol. When somebody buys from an Amoritz, sheyafresh hakol misafik. This is the institution of Demai, that everything should be separated out of a doubt that the Amoritz didn't do it. Because by Tevel you have a penalty of death, but this did not apply to Truma. There was no gezer to separate Truma. V'lo gazer al hadamai lefi sheshalach b'chol gvul Yisrael v'ro shahayu ameorts mezalzim b'maisros v'lo hayu mafrishin al Truma gedola. Because he saw that they were mezalzel, the ameorts did not take care of maisros, but in fact they did separate Truma gedola. That's why again there is no demai by Truma gedola. And so then the Gemara revised the answer and said, we don't mean Truma, but we mean Trumas Meiser. Trumas Meiser, you could have Avadamai. Shahalevi Mafresh Lakohen, Meiser Min HaMeiser. The Levi, when he gets Meiser Rishon, he separates 1/10 from that. That's 1/10 from the 1/10, because Meiser Rishon is 1/10. Then you separate 1/10 from that. That's Meiser Min HaMeiser. He separates 1/10 from the Meiser Rishon. V'ukare Truma, that's referred to as Truma. V'yasser Truma, it's Asr. It has all the same prohibitions as Truma. So you can have this idea of Trumas Meiser of Demai. And the Gemara continues, Boy mi name Rav Sheshes. They asked Rav Sheshes the following question. Let's say a person is working with his animal, and so you're not supposed to muzzle the animal, you're supposed to allow it to eat. So let's say the animal is eating from the food while it's working, and then it has diarrhea. So what's the halach in that case? Maybe in that case you should say that you should muzzle the animal, because clearly the food is not good for the animal. And so that Gemara clarifies the question. Mishum de mali lahu is the reason why we're supposed to let the animal eat, because the food is good for it. V'halo mali lo, and clearly this food is not good for it. Odilmor, maybe de chaziu mitztara. The issue is that the animal sees the food, and if you don't let it eat, if you muzzle the animal, then the animal's in pain. V'chaziu mitztara. That's happening now also, whether it has diarrhea or not. The animal sees the food, and the animal is in pain, so maybe you should not be allowed to muzzle the animal. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Lahu Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes said to them, Tani Suah, we learned it, this is what we learned above. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, Maybe Karshinim v'tola la, what you should do in that case above, where it looked like it was a problem about Tachsum, it was a Maris or Ayin, so he said you should bring vetch and you should hang it by the mouth of the animal so it could eat from the Karshinim. Sha Karshinim Yafos la, because Karshinim are Yafos la min akol, that's the healthiest food for the animal. And so what do you see from the way Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is phrasing it? Shmami no, we see from this, Mishum de Mali Lahu, you see that the issue is that it should be healthy for it. Shma Mina, and the Gemara says, indeed, you see that's the case. So in this particular situation, you would be allowed to muzzle the animal. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question, what's the halacha in terms of a person saying to a non-Jew, Chasom porasi, muzzle my cow, v'doshba, and use it to thresh with, mi'amrinon ki amrinon amiru l'nochri shavus. Do we say that, when do we say that telling a non-Jew to do something that's asr midoraisa for the Jew to do, so we say there's a concept of shavus, that's asr midorabanan. You can't tell a non-Jew to do something that the Jew is not allowed to do on a doraisa level, that's an isr derabanan of amir l'nochri. So maybe hani mili l'inyan Shabbos, maybe that's only true in terms of the laws of Shabbos. The isr skila, because Shabbos is very strict, it's a violation which can bring a person to skila, to being stoned, it's a death penalty. Aval chasima, but when it comes to muzzling, the isr lav, that's just a violation of a negative commandment. Lo, so maybe there's no concept of Amir l'Nachri. Odilmar, maybe Lo Shna, maybe it's no different. There is a concept of Amir l'Nachri. And the Gemara says, Tashma, coming here a proof again from the above Brisa, Nachri Hadosh B'Paroso Shal Yisrael. It says, if a non-Jew threshes with the cow of a Yisrael, Eino over Misham Bal Tachsam. There's no transgression of the Do'oraisa of Bal Tachsam. So Ma'aver Hu de Lo Avar, it sounds like there's no transgression of the Do'oraisa, Ha'isuri Ika, but there is an Isser. It sounds like there is a violation, at least at a Durabanan level. That's the implication of the Brisa. The Gemara says not necessarily. Bedinu d'isur nami, like it could be that there's no isur d'rabbanan either. Va'aidi d'tana seifa, but since the end of the brisa says the Yisrael hadosh beparaso shal nachri, that if a Yisrael threshes with the cow of a non-Jew over, he does transgress on a d'oraisa level the Baal Tachsum. So we talk about the d'oraisa in that part of the brisa. So tana reisha ain't over. That's why the language used in the beginning of the brisa is there's no transgression, but it could be there's no isur d'rabbanan as well. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here the following proof, Tishalchu le liavua de Shmuel, they sent to the father of Shmuel, Halein Tori, these oxen, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Amud Beis.